Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Wednesday, January 31st. Derek Van Riper here with Eno Saris. It is part 3 of our starting pitcher preview. So if you're looking for pitchers that go within the first 200 overall picks in many fantasy baseball drafts, they are covered in the previous 2 episodes. If you're watching this video on YouTube, smash the like button immediately, subscribe to the channel, leave us a nice rating and review if you're listening to us as a podcast, and drop some comments under this video if you got some questions or thoughts about the contents within this show. How is January coming to an end already? I mean, the preview season kind of speeds everything up day to day, but this is bonkers.
January is a long month. I'm about to hit my 90th mile today running. And the animals were not kind to me last night. 3 o'clock wake up by the worst cat in the world. Then a 5:30 wake up by the dogs who are trying to be good. And then there was some weird beeping. Our fire alarms are being annoying.
Check
some
the batteries.
Beeping at 6. Yeah. But it's like one of those things. We got a lot of them. And so I don't really, it's like, oh, okay. Now I got to spend an hour
figuring out which one it is.
Yeah. My wife doesn't have great hearing in one ear, so like she can't really help me.
Worse.
Yeah, she's like, I can't really echolocate this. It's all on you. And then, like it sometimes it'll like bounce around a corner. You're like, I think it's right. It's this one. I swear to God, it's this one. And then you change it, and it beeps like 5 seconds later. You're like, no.
If it's not the dogs, it's the smoke alarm. Someone's getting you. Something or someone is getting you.
I think I've slept all the way
day.
through the night in like 2 weeks.
Well,
I'm not happy about that. But
such
today
is life.
I'm going to run 9 more miles, and I'm going to be so tired that if anything happens, I'll just be like, whatever, and turn back over and go back to sleep.
I'm going to shoot for 3 on the treadmill in the basement and get to 6 for the month. So you'll have a pretty good edge on me this month. Hey, the fact that I got the treadmill running again is really good.
That is good. That's good enough for January. February is for actually using it.
Yes, exactly. A month to figure out how to set it up the way I wanted it. Let's get back into where we left off yesterday. Tier 9 ADP wise. These are pitchers that go around pick 200 to pick 225. It's a pretty big group. 2
I can
slides.
still fall in love here.
Oh, yeah. There's some good pitchers in this group. We got Civale, Pfaadt, Shöta, Imanaga, Lucas Giolito, Darvish, who got some love on the day 2 of the pitcher week. Brayan, Bello, Charlie Morton, Yusei, Kikuchi, Lodolo, and Reid Detmers. So we start kind of at the top here. Civale's post-trade results last season with the Rays weren't great, but the K rate jumped to 29.3%. He kept the walk rate. It was a 335 Sierra, very small sample, 45 into third innings. But are we going to get a better version of Civale in Tampa Bay than we were accustomed to during his time in Cleveland?
Yeah, I think he became a kind of a 3 breaking ball guy, and I don't know. Every place labels it differently. This is something that came up with Cal Bradish. It's like, is it a curve, or does he throw a fastball, a cutter, and a slider? Does he throw a cutter, a slider, and a curveball? Any case, Civale's flirted with being a 3 breaking ball guy, but I think Cleveland saw that his slider and cutter were morphing together, or a slider and a curveball were morphing together, and so they kind of backed him off of that. And in Tampa, they said, no, we like this. Let's do both of these. And I'm trying to look at how much they morphed together, or how much they stayed apart. I don't see real big changes in movement when he went there, except that it's more of a sweeper, I guess. It's become more of a sweeper over time. So then you become sweeper, cutter, curve, and you can kind of keep these things separately. But if you look at the horizontal movement on a slider and a curve, they are the same. The difference is 11 inches of drop, which I guess that's good enough. I think that there's something there about how it morphs together. It affects his command, and so he gets more whiffs, but he also becomes a little bit more hittable. In the end, it's funny sometimes when somebody makes an adjustment like this, and they are somehow a little bit different under the hood, and yet in some, they end up being who you thought they were. You know what I mean? Like
the same result.
high threes guy with lots of strikeouts, and better than people think he is. But I don't think he's like he's had a 2 ERA season. Last year was his best since that 3.46. I don't think he's the high fours guy either. So I'm betting on a high threes ERA with a slightly above average strikeout rate.
Yeah, that's going to work in this range because we're going to have some ratios damage potential as we move through this group. We experienced that a little bit last year with Brandon Pfaadt. If you were rostering at the beginning of the season, and if you listened to the show, you probably were, because we liked Brandon Pfaadt quite a bit. It did not go well for him in the first half. He made a late season adjustment. I think it was around August where he moved on the rubber. Things started to fall into place for him during the second half. He still had a home run issue, and I think we saw him pitching really well in the postseason. We saw a 19.1 K- BB percentage in the second half. There's a lot to build on here, even if it's not a leap up to SP2, SP3 status right away. I do see some similarities to what I expect from Pfaadt, to what you just described from Aaron Civale. So it seems like you're getting a guy that has some room for growth, but doesn't necessarily have to do it all in 1 year where he's going in drafts right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that adding the sinker late in the season for Pfaadt was a big deal. He doesn't have the best four-seamer, and so it's a 97 stuff plus on the four-seamer. It's only a 97 stuff plus on the sinker, but now it's two different looks. And in particular, if you look at how he does against righties, that sinker has been a huge deal for him. So now he has two fastballs he can use against righties. He has the sweeper. He has the curveball. He's a 4-pitch guy, and he was dominant against righties, last year in terms of his splits. Even with how bad he was overall in the, I guess I have to do the splits tool here because I want to do second half. If I could do that here. Anyway, remember the playoffs, at least. He was dominant against righties. Against lefties, though, it was still kind of pulling teeth a little bit. I don't know if you remember those at-bats. Every time he was up against like Schwarber, and I know that Schwarber's good, but every time he was up against that, he was like, is my changeup good enough? I can't really throw my sinker against them. Is my four-seam good enough? And he was trying to dance around and like never leave anything middle. And they went long, lots of pitches to Harper, Schwarber, all the lefties. He kind of seemed like he was struggling against lefties. So I like him. I like his secondaries. And I think this is a good place for someone to take a shot on him. This is a good price, but I think there's people in this tier I like a little better.
Yeah, and if you want to check out Eno's rankings, those went up earlier this week. Theathletic.com/rates and barrels will get you a subscription for $2 a month for the first year. I think you'll notice if you look at those rankings, Shöta Imanaga is very highly ranked. He's inside your top 40. I would imagine he sort of jumps within this ADP tier as someone you'd be targeting.
Yeah, we've got just a little quick thing here. This is Imanaga's numbers from the WBC. Now, you'll see the number of pitches thrown is not high. However, 45 pitches on a fastball does meet the regression amount. In other words, this is a signal for Stuff Plus, and he's got a 149 Stuff Plus on that fastball. That is an amazing fastball. It's not amazing by velo, but it has really, really good shape. And there are some people who succeed in the major leagues with great shape as opposed to great velo. And I think Imanaga is going to be one of them. Slider looks pretty good. You start getting to poor samples on the other pitches, but I'm going to guess from this and from the strikeout minus walk numbers that in Japan were better than Yamamoto's last year. They weren't better over the last 3 years, but last year they were better than Yamamoto's. So this is a guy who's going to strike a lot of guys out. In my big piece on him, the comps ran the gamut. They're in terms of K- BB, the comps are like Gossman and the best, and Cole and the best in the league. But that's Japanese K- BB, so you have to take it with a little bit of grain of salt. In terms of like gives up homers and has good ride and this kind of an arsenal, doesn't have great velo. Some of the comps were Joe Ryan, Nestor Cortes. a good Christian Javier. So I do think that there's a little bit of risk here. There's that homer risk. There's this. You just think about the guys I just named. They've all had great seasons and they've all had terrible seasons, and they kind of live and die with their homer rate. But in the first season in Chicago with, a cold early season, like, maybe it gets a little bit worse over the course of the season, but I think at least for the beginning part of the season, I like him. And we're in the part of the draft where like you can almost get to use cases like that. We're like, can I use him for 2 months? Yes. Will I be a little nervous in August? Yes. But among all these guys, just the fact that the league hasn't seen him and he has this sort of nascent arsenal that looks pretty good. I think I like him the best out of all these guys. I think that's what my rankings say too.
Yeah. Darvish, I think I would consider just a tick ahead of him. I think that's where you've got him ranked.
Yeah, and I think I had Darvish ahead of him. Yeah, but those are the guys I have ranked out of this tier.
Yeah, I'm with you as far as those two kind of standing out as the best value, but I do like Civale and Pfaadt at this price. I'm not in on Lucas Giolito right now as a rebound candidate. I know he had a great run from 2019 to 2021 with mid threes ERAs, great whips, over 200 Ks in those 2 full seasons. A lot was working. It just seems like the arsenal isn't as crisp now as it was then. If we see signs in the spring that he's dialing it up the same way he was a couple seasons ago, if he's back at 94 with the fastball, that would be a nice step in the right direction. But what else would you want to see from Giolito before opening day if you were going to start to have a little more confidence in Boston taking a smart flyer here?
Yeah, the velo is the big one. I mean, the stuff plus on his fastball last year was 82, and I don't even need to tell you that just to know that like a guy with a home run rate like that, and a guy who used to be sitting close to 95 and is now sitting closer to 93. I don't need a fancy number to tell you that the fastball has been a problem. But interestingly, he used to also have more ride. So that's not something that's going to be super obvious in spring. But so the easier number to track in spring is his average. The thing that you have to be careful about is, and this is what messes up spring velo numbers, is what if he goes out there for 2 innings and sits 95 and everyone loses their mind? Does that mean he's going to sit 95 for 5 innings and 6 innings? And so I wonder if maybe an easier thing to track in the spring is his max, because he used to have a max of 97 when he was at his healthiest, and his max in October last year was 94.6. And the top that he hit all year last year was 96.6. So I would say if you start seeing some 97s, even on like a max level, that's an indication that he could be a little bit more interesting this year, because he still has the strong changeup and a good slider, and that's an interesting combo to have.
Yeah, last season, opposing hitters slugged .531 against Lucas Giolito's 4-seamer. 17 home runs allowed against that pitch alone. The other big difference for me is when you look back at his best years, you'll see a positive run value on his slider as well. So it wasn't just the fastball changeup, it was the slider. Everything went blue. And nothing was working for him.
And the slider lost velo too. I mean, he used to be an 89-90 almost on the slider. He finished October with an 84.8.
And we covered Darvish a lot on part 2, but the other thing I didn't really notice previously with Darvish, that we've had this kind of slow decline in swinging strike rate, which makes me think that the K rate might be closer to the 24-25% range. Pretty normal for this part of the draft board, but maybe you're not getting that full bounce back into the 28+% range, which it seems like splitting hairs. It's just realizing that your ceiling isn't what it used to be. It makes sense though, given the stage of the career that Darvish is in.
Yeah. I don't think I'm shooting for ceiling though, where I'm drafting him. So yeah, the price is good on this one.
It's remarkable seeing him next to Giolito. There's so much more to like, I think, right now in Darvish by comparison, even though he's several years older. Back part of this tier, Brayan Bello, I think you had this in your player cap. It kind of comes down to whether or not the slider gets better. If he's going to take another step forward as a part of this Red Sox rotation, I'm going to ask you kind of a broad question. Don't know if I'm going to get a great answer today because it's a tough question, but what do you look for as far as elements that give you an idea that a slider could get better? Are there other characteristics that a pitcher might have that would make you think there is a chance he can fix this slider? And does Bello have those characteristics?
Well, one of the dumbest things, and I say dumb because it's just so simple, but velo is super important for sliders. And 85 is a bit of a magic number. Bello has been around that, though. So you kind of have to put that in tandem with some observed results, right? So if you look and you see, they slugged, what was it, 429 on the slider last year for Bello. That's not good, for a slider. That's pretty bad for a slider. And you see that he's kept the velo above 85. You can't just be like, well, that's going to work itself out. But what is interesting is in August, it was 85.5, and in September, it was 86.1. And that is, he's doing that without too much of a change in the vertical movement profile. In terms of for his career, it's had a certain amount of drop. So he's getting there, I think. And it's interesting to have this package. I don't normally like starting with a changeup. This seems to me like a slider league. We see sliders, more and more sliders every year. If you have a slider, it's more likely that you can create 3 pitches out of it. Like think about where we are now with the sweeper, the gyro, the cutter, the curve. There's all these like different variations you can put on it. There's not that many people who throw like 3 changeups, and so the slider, being able to spin the ball, is super important to me. So this is not somebody that this is not a profile that I normally am in love with, but it is a good changeup. It is a good sinker. And the slider on Stuff Plus for the year, 96. If you can locate that and he's throwing the harder one, that's where the breakout will be for me.
Yeah, I think I'm much more likely to take the chance on Bello than I am to try and get the bounce back from Giolito, since we're talking about guys that are really close on the board right now. I think when you look back at the minor league track record, it can be fool's gold sometimes, but you see 30% K rates pretty much everywhere from high A all the way up until he got promoted. A massive drop during the time in the big leagues, but there's got to be some room to nudge that upwards, especially if that slider comes together for Brayan Bello. And maybe even if it doesn't, maybe a little more consistency with location can go a long way toward making that happen. Charlie Morton goes down here. The note that kind of caught me by surprise, it was the worst walk rate we've seen from Charlie Morton since 2008. Good on him for, still pitching in the big leagues after that much time. But what happened? Why do you think the walk rate spiked as badly as it did for Charlie Morton? Because it really turned the whip into something pretty ugly.
Yeah, I think the problem is just that he's getting into the Adam Wainwright section of his career where he's still got the elite curveball and is still elite in results and in modeling. But he's had to, he threw his most changeups in 6 years. And he's throwing the cutter and, he threw some sinkers and like he's trying to kitchen sink a little bit while also throwing the curveball more than he ever has in his history. So those are just all traditionally bigger pitches that are harder to locate, and also pitches that he hasn't focused on, so much in his career. So you just assume the command would be a little bit worse.
Yeah, I think that makes
other
sense.
than the curveball, which is, I think, he has thrown a ton of curveballs, but the bigger the movement profile, the harder it is to locate.
Well, and I think when you look at his curveball heat maps too, he buries stuff down and away to righties a lot. That'd be down and in to lefties. But if you're below the zone, you're throwing that pitch more than ever. Guys may be spitting on that a little bit more. So that could be the other cause of that walk rate creeping up for Morton.
I still like him here. I mean, you may have some times where you don't know what to do to keep her to drop. But one thing I would just sort of watch that has been constantly there for Charlie is a really good swinging strike rate. He's had it over 12% for 5 years running. So if he comes out and is struggling in a way where it's only a 9 or 10% swinging strike rate, I think you have an easy benchmark to kind of watch in the early going. Plus, if he's down if he's down big in velo, but he's kept it around 95 for the last 3 years. So I think he's still got some of that in the tank.
Yeah, that's the funny thing about looking at him. You mentioned Wainwright with the curveball, and it's like, well, he still has a much better fastball by velo than most guys that age. So the decline shouldn't be quite as harsh, even if we're clearly in that decline phase for Charlie Morton. I'm kind of okay with it, but probably won't have a lot of Morton. I think one of the best things about him is he's still on a very good team. They need him. Mm-hmm. He's an important part of their rotation. Might be a decent source of wins in ERA, but I think that whip could still be a problem this year. And maybe innings start to become more of a problem for Morton at this stage of his career as well. Yusei Kikuchi goes in this range. I wondered if the Jays sort of Robbie Reid Kikuchi's walk rate. I mean, they did it a few years ago with Ray, and it was a really nice year. Kind of important for the Jays, too, given the collapse of Alek Manoah. To get the quality they got from Kikuchi was really encouraging. And it kind of seems like year over year, every season he's been in the big leagues, he's found ways to get just a little bit better. It's reflected in the Sierra, just small incremental improvements. And this last improvement came in a year where the run environment became more difficult overall.
Yeah, I think it's like kind of a question of just finding his mix. He slimmed it down. At times this past year, he was a 3-pitch guy. And the changeup he started using less over the course of the season. So it's been, 3 pitches, but I think the biggest thing has been finding a good breaking ball that he can command. He used to throw a cutter and a slider, and the slider was soft and the cutter was hard, and he couldn't command anything. And now he's sort of settled in on a slider that has less drop than it used to and goes harder, but is not the cutter. And so he kind of throws a bullet slider, and that is a kind of an interesting idea for somebody. If you have somebody that's struggling with command, the bullet slider, in terms of how we think about movement in baseball, the bullet slider has the least movement in baseball. And we know that we've had some findings that the larger the movement pattern is, the harder it is to command. So you got a guy who can't command things, like teach him a gyro slider and see if he can't at least find a hard slider that he can put where he wants to. That changes everything, because now he can use that slider when he's behind the count. And his natural poor four-seam command is not on the level of even a Dylan Cease, I think we talked about before. So it's just sort of below average four-seam command, average slider command, but the slider is also a good pitch for whiffs. And then late last season, the thing I liked the best was that he brought the curveball back in. I think he's just going to be a spin guy, and I don't think he had great natural command of that change either. So 2 breaking balls and a four-seam, good velo. This is the way out of a command situation.
Yeah, nice adjustments overall for Kikuchi. I think I would take him over Morton if I'm looking at the would you rather toss-ups within this group. But more likely, I'm taking Nick Lodolo over both of them. I really like Nick Lodolo. It's really just a question of health for me.
Lodolo should be spelled with a Y. It should be Lodolo.
Well, the problem is the health grade you had on him is a C. It's better than I expected. I thought we were getting another D or an F possibly, and that's the bucket that I'd love to shop in, is just the guys that have terrible health grades. So
it's probably an F in my heart, though.
Here's the thing, though. I think aside from the injuries, people worry about Great American Ballpark, and sometimes I think the worry exceeds a level that is rational. If you think back to Johnny Cueto a long time ago, Luis Castillo more recently, and even Sonny Gray, pitchers can succeed. Good pitchers can succeed in Cincinnati, right?
Coors, right?
Yeah, like I'm not dismissing a Hunter Green breakout because of the ballpark, and I'm not dismissing a Nick Lodolo breakout because of the ballpark either. I think the stuff has to reach a certain level, but I think Lodolo has it. I think there's a good chance that he's out there and maybe a top 100 overall pick again going into next season. I think he got close to that last year, if memory served me right. But we saw good control, nice K rate last year. Ratios were brutal, but the underlying skills looked solid around all the injuries. It was only 34 in a third innings last season. I'm with you. Like, my brain, my heart are more like, this is an F health grade. It might say C because he's young and hasn't been hurt a million times, but this is risky.
I also think minor league days missed on the IL is not necessarily something that's easy to scrape or find. So it's working on major league IL days, and I think that's probably why it's a C. But I can tell you that the Stuff Plus is superlative on all 4 of his pitches. But you can actually see it in the numbers. A 28% strikeout rate in a debut or follow up in a season this bad. A 29.7% strikeout rate in his debut. A 3.29 Sierra. Sierra's, if you want a 1 number sort of ERA estimator, I like PPERA because it has stuff in it. But Sierra's there on the Fangraphs boards, and 3.29 Sierra for Lodolo in 2022, 3.46 this last year. Called strikes plus whiffs is a decent stat too that you can use. That's just, I think it's basically trying to put together command with stuff and give you an idea of like, can he get whiffs and can he get called strikes? A 30.9 is good. Do you happen to know off the top of your head like what the average is? I think it's like 28 or something, 27. I need Nick in here, Pollock, but so I know 30.9 is pretty good. And so, I guess, the projections sort of range for Lodolo from like a 1.4 homers per 9 from Zips to a 1.19 from Steamer. And that right there describes most of the difference between him having low threes, high threes to mid 4s ERA. It's a lot of it has to do with that home run rate.
Yeah. And you look back at how he has worked throughout his brief time in their minor league system, it's usually a really high ground ball rate. So I don't think the extreme homer problems we saw. Yeah, like the extreme homer problems we saw in this injury-plagued 2023 season, that's probably not really a sign of things to come. So I'm all over Lodolo in this range. I think other people like him too for good reason, but I think he's a great value where he's going right now because the floor for skills is actually pretty solid, and the ceiling, as we've already seen what he did in 2022, that's probably just like a step toward the ceiling. It's not even the best version of Lodolo that we possibly could see.
3.64 PPERA for Lodolo.
That's real good.
Yeah.
That's real good. Reid Detmers closes out this tier. More strikeouts last year, but worse ratios. And we're also a little light on innings relative to what I expected back when the Angels drafted him. I thought part of the appeal was that he was maybe the most polished college pitcher in that draft class. He'd come in and just be a workhorse year over year. 135 innings in 2022, 148 and 2/3 last year. And weirdly, Reid Detmers gives up a lot of homers to lefties. Really strange. He's got a reverse split now for his career. I just thought we'd be getting a little more consistency start to start from Detmers than what he's done up to this point. He is still just 24, so maybe there's one more gear. What is it that's kept him from at least building on the good ratios that he put together in 2022 when he had that 3.77 ERA and 121 whip?
I don't think it's a good fastball. He did start throwing a little bit of a sweeper last year, and that might help him with those reverse splits. As we know, platoon splits are big on the sweeper, meaning that, they're better for same-handed as opposite-handed guys. So if he's having trouble getting lefties out, maybe the sweeper will help him because he does have a strong slider. It has changed a little bit over time, but it's a strong kind of gyro bullet slider with less movement. And those types of sliders have smaller platoon splits. So that might be related to why he has these reverse platoon splits. But it's not a great fastball. So what you're looking for is probably to see some of those sweepers iron out those reverse platoon splits and see him go kind of breaking ball heavy and hide the fastball to some extent.
Yeah, maybe that's the next adjustment. Would love to see some more innings from Reid Detmers. The two would be huge for the Angels to get that from him. If he could end up being more like a mid-rotation guy, I think that's an ultimate win for them in the long run. Let's move on to tier 10. This is like pick 250 to 275. So a lot of names.
A little nastier in here.
Yeah, you start to see more pitfalls in this range. This is a group that includes Kenta Maeda, Christopher Sánchez, Andrew Abbott, Nestor Cortes, Taj Bradley, Marcus Stroman, and John Means. So one of these names sort of jumps off the page to me as someone that's different than the others by like prospect pedigree and hype. That, of course, is Taj Bradley. He had some walk issues at AAA last year. He had some stretches getting hit really hard with the Rays. Bradley's only going to be 23 in March, and the overall like age to level progression we've seen from him in the Rays system is really good. I look back at those Fangraphs scouting grades all the time. With Bradley, it's a 60 on both the fastball and the slider. It was present 50 command with future 60. That alone should be enough to be a 5-inning starter. And there's other stuff Bradley's tried to do. So what hasn't clicked for him so far? Because it seemed to me like the way he cruised to their system, he was going to hit the ground running and be a lot more successful from the jump than he was in 2023.
As the king of waffles, I have to tell you before I say a bunch of negative things that I love Bradley here. I would take him a million times. A 28% strikeout rate in the debut is great. 96 mile an hour velocity, great fastball. That's a foundation for all this. Great, results in the minor leagues and strikeout rates. A little bit worse as he advanced, but there's so much to like here that I'm still in. But I do want to describe the flaws. And, one thing that had happened when I talked to him, he hasn't been pitching that long. He kind of just started pitching in high school. And so with the Rays, he kind of learned all his pitches. Mm-hmm. And, one thing he said was that when he went to the minor leagues, he was supposed to get his cutter back, the cutter velo back. And so this is an interesting thing here. So what we're showing on YouTube is his heat map. And this is his heat map of cutters over 89 miles an hour. So this is supposedly what he was supposed to be doing well with, right? And cutters over 89 miles an hour, where he's putting them. And so what happened was he went to the minor leagues, came back. So I was like, okay, I'm just looking at cutters over 89 miles an hour. And I was like, why are cutters over 89 miles an hour giving up a slugging percentage over 600? And then I looked against lefties, and the slugging percentage was 300. The slugging percentage from Taj Bradley on righties is over 900. So look at this heat map. I think it's too much in the zone, and it's low in the zone. So it's kind of like, to a righty, it's like a slider that's not sliding. Mm-hmm. And it's ending up like it's low middle. That's I think a place a lot of righties can hit.
It's kind of a launching bat path location. Yeah.
It ends up like just right where the barrel goes. And he's not keeping it in on the hands or keeping it off the plate. So I don't know if this is a command issue or if it's just like, hey, Taj, let's focus on the cutter more against lefties and the curve more against righties. I think there is like kind of like a pitch missing, like a true slider. I don't even know what they're calling a slider in the Fangraphs, grades. Is it this cutter?
Fair question.
I would assume it is. But I wish he had a true slider. And so, sometimes when you're looking at young players, I think the thing to think about is, and I don't have a great answer for this, and it's something I've been thinking about a lot. It's like, what do you want as a foundation? Do you want the Bryce Miller, Taj Bradley foundation where you have a great fastball and you think they can do something with it? Do you want the Tanner Bybee foundation where they think it's really spin a breaking ball, but maybe the fastball isn't so amazing? There's there's different it's not every day that you get, like maybe a Bobby Miller who can like spin it and has velo. And even him, it's like the strikeout rate's not great. Would you rather have tons of strikeouts? Some sort of demonstrated results, So, Bradley's, I think Bryce Miller is a better version of Bradley in that he's shown us the ability to do some things that Bradley hasn't shown us yet. Frankly, I don't know that Bradley has shown us a secondary that's plus yet.
Well, a full off season to continue working on it opens up the door. I think he's among the many players you say, oh, what's he got in spring? What's he doing? Is there anything new? That would be a pretty big indicator.
A new pitch alert on him would really open my eyes. I mean, if it was a true slider, or if the curveball was more of like a power 85 mile an hour curveball or something, I would be more interested. I know it says on his page that he's thrown a lot of pitches and that it looks like a 4-pitch mix, but I don't trust really any of those. The splitter's decent, but in terms of getting righties out, he's still looking for an out pitch other than the fastball.
Yeah, let's hope he can find one. Decent value where he's going. I think it's more of a draft him, wait and see, be a little careful about how you use him. And I think we're far enough down the board where if it's not working out, if he gets sent down to AAA to begin the season, you can probably cut him. in a lot of formats and just try to pick him up again later if you don't have the ability to stash and wait it out for a few weeks or even a couple of months for the opportunity to surface again. So really wide range of outcomes, still plenty to like, but a clear flaw for Taj Bradley.
You could put him diametrically opposed to one of the other young people. I mean, there's three young guys in here, but one of the other young guys in here in this tier, Andrew Abbott, is like the opposite of Taj Bradley. His pitches have almost exactly average movement. There's no pitch that he throws that stands out by Stuff Plus, by eye test. I've watched a lot of Andrew Abbott and I don't get it at all. I've even talked to Andrew Abbott about how I don't get it. And he said he didn't punch me in the face. And he just told me that, like, I know, but it's been working for me, you know? And so in a way, it's an opposite where you look at Andrew Abbott's, I think you had some show notes about just as like his abilities in the minor leagues, like his results in the minor leagues are outstanding.
Yeah, like at a certain point, you have to look at the track record, and Bello had this too. So like it doesn't always just come
right.
Up
His went from 30 to 20 in the major leagues,
but 30% K rates everywhere for Andrew Abbott. I mean, that's just a really good foundation. It's heavy fly ball tendencies in a park where that can be really problematic. Like you, I've watched Abbott a few times and kind of came away with what the heck? Why is this working as well as it's working? It's funny that you had a chance to ask him about it, and I'm glad he was cool about it because I'm sure I don't think you were trying to be like mean or anything and be like, hey, like you're having some success doing some things that don't seem to come together in my mind. So I'm just glad that you had a chance to talk to him about it.
It was like execution, willingness to live high in the zone. But then you look at his heat maps and it's almost middle. So this is perplexing to me. And I would point out again, monthly splits aren't super predictive, but for pitchers, especially young pitchers, I'm going to keep an eye on something like this. The last 2 months, an ERA over 6.
Yeah, maybe the league just started to adjust. It looks a little different. They pick up the book, they find some ways to hit him, and he has to counter adjust to that. But compared to the other Red starters, I'm just not as optimistic about Abbott. Maybe he's the way that Graham Ashcraft solidifies a rotation spot. Some of my late Graham Ashcraft shares actually end up having some value. But Cristopher Sánchez is the other guy that's kind of in this bucket where his minor league numbers aren't as good as what he did in his debut last year. And we've seen this before. Like this seems kind of similar to what they did with Ranger Suarez a couple of years ago, right? Where Suarez came up and put up some ridiculous ratios the first time he was in the rotation. No one expected when he made the move from the bullpen to the rotation and had a 1.36 ERA and an even 1 WHIP back in 2021. No one thought that was the true talent level for Ranger Suarez. But the thing that confused me about Suarez was you'd go back and you'd look at what he was doing in the upper levels of their system, and it wasn't nearly as good or as consistent. You didn't see big K totals. You didn't really see consistently great ratios at AAA or anything. It's just kind of like sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. I think that's what I see in Sánchez, and I think we stumbled into
you're right.
something.
There's been some up and down there.
We stumbled into something before the show. You were looking at second half K- BB leaders again. And Sánchez actually pops on that leaderboard as someone that was doing really, really well in the second half of the season. A 20.9% K- BB in the second half, which
that
25%
strikeout rate, 4% walk rate.
Yeah, people are going to look at that and say, "Oh, I believe in Cristopher Sánchez." I don't know. I'm not sure. In part because I don't usually trust guys in that park unless I know the skills are good. I guess I just can't get a good enough read on the skills to buy in.
Cristopher Sánchez was the number 2 biggest riser in Stuff Plus when we did the revision. And so the revision on Stuff Plus included platoon splits for the first time and some weather and air density factors. And he was the number 2 riser. So that changeup now has a 143 Stuff Plus.
That's really good.
It's really excellent. The slider is 99, but he locates it well. And the sinker doesn't do as well, but sinkers don't do that well in the model. And he does locate it well. And I think that's the razor thin margin he's living on. Because if you think about a lefty who throws sinker, changeup, slider, you can't just get by on one pitch to righties.
No.
and you don't normally throw sinkers to opposite-handed guys. And so the way that you have success is when you're locating that sinker, and you can locate it. There's some places you can put a sinker. You can put to opposite-handed. You can do high and away sinkers, actually. You can do front door sinkers. Like is that right? Lefty. Yeah, you can do front door sinkers where you're throwing it at them and it comes over the inside part of the plate. You can do high and away. You just can't do low and away because we had years and years of training where people saw low and away sinkers and figured out how to just slice those the opposite way. And that's, I think, why people can't throw sinkers to opposite-handed guys low and away. When he has this command, he's going to be good. And I think that actually also explains his up and down in the minors, because he had in Tampa Bay, he had some years with 28, 25, 26% strikeout rates with good walk rates. And he comes over to Philadelphia. The walk rate kind of explodes. He doesn't have a great debut. He goes back down to AAA, and again, 25% strikeout rate, 8% walk rate. That's good. Then he has a hard time in his debut with a 20% walk rate and a 10% walk rate and a 20% strikeout rate. And you heard those numbers. The second half came on as BB. Well, the thing that's the outlier for him over his career is that walk rate. Mm-hmm. So, if he goes back to like an 8, 9, 10% walk rate, that's how he's not going to be as good. And it's going to have sort of cascading effects, because if you can't place a sinker, how's he going to get righties out?
Right. And I think even if it's all working, if the control is good, I think he's going to have kind of a permanent home run problem with the approach that he has. The hitters are going to be able to guess a little more often and guess right. That ballpark's going to kind of elevate that problem over a longer sample. So I do think it has to be sustained improvements in the control. I would say this is another opportunity to point out, with the automated balls and strike system at AAA last year, maybe you look at the skills drop off at AAA from 22 to 23, and maybe that's got something to do with it, because the numbers are so much better.
It almost tracks as like league average both times. I think the strikeout rate blew up so much league wide that him going from an 8.5% strike walk rate in 2022, Sánchez 13% walk rate in 2023 with ABS. That I think that almost tracks with league average.
Yeah, called strike and whiff rate, nearly 31% for Sánchez. The other metric that's going to pop for people and get them to jump on board with him as a sleeper. And he can keep the ball.
Beautiful changeup.
And he can keep the ball on the ground. So maybe the home run problem isn't the worst it could be, but I just think they're always going to be there. I don't think he's going to be an extreme low home run rate sort of guy.
I got him in the middle, sandwiched in the middle of these young guys.
So you're okay with him where he's going?
I'll go Bradley, Sánchez, Abbott among the young guys. My favorite old guy is on that strikeout minus walk rate leaderboard right above him. Number 20, second half strikeout minus walk rate, heavier on the strikeouts, 28% strikeouts, 7% walk rate in the second half. Kenta Maeda, come on down. It's a terrible fastball, but it's a beautiful splitter. It's a nice park. I think it's going to work. It might have some homers, may have some bad days on the road, but he landed in a perfect place.
Yeah, I think we've talked about it in detail when we talked about the Tigers' rotation depth and the way Scott Harris has sort of put that group together. They're taking on some innings risk and knowing that if they've got 8 or 9 starters they like, they're always going to have 5 or so that they can throw out there. Maeda definitely fits the elevated injury risk group, but the skills, the ratios should be good. And I think the park makes him very streamable.
64 stuff plus on the fastball.
Maybe don't throw it.
Yeah, well, at some point you have to. He did throw last year 1,000 split fingers and sliders and 464 seams.
So he's already tried to hide it.
Yeah, he's definitely hiding it.
Now, I like Maeda where he's going. Totally fine value. Love that he was pitching well in the second half last year too, especially coming off of the injury. Nestor Cortes had his home run rate kind of track back toward previous norms. Totally makes sense given the ballpark that he's in. I think he's actually still a little undervalued in this tier as long as he's healthy. That's the key. It was a shoulder injury that cost him time last year. But I think what you see overall is kind of what you get. I think this is a package that is useful in this range. It's not going to be great ratios, but it's probably not going to hurt you. High win probabilities and actually a better than average K rate for players that go in this range. Even with the slight step back last year, Nestor Cortes had a 25% K rate for the third straight season.
Yeah, it's it's like hard to place him. Like I just made up this little rubric of young and old guys, and he's not either. He doesn't really have a demonstrated track record. 393 innings, 382 ERA. That's pretty good, but it's not, I wouldn't say like, exactly who he is, especially since the most recent one is a 4.97 ERA. But yeah, the strikeout rate in most of his big volume seasons the last 3 years, especially with a little bit of velo boost, he used to be 89 and now he's 92. He's had it at 25 or plus, and so above average strikeouts, below average walks, above average home runs per 9. I think the package all adds up to a low 4s ERA. Maybe right there, maybe even 3.9, 4.1, like it, and it's going to be in some ways, in some leagues, not that useful. But the deeper your league gets, the more useful. I think he'll get wins. I think this New York team is going to be better this year. I think they're going to score runs. And so if you look up at the end of the season and he's got a 4 ERA with 150 innings, 150, 160 strikeouts and like 14 wins, like that's going to be like a top 40 pitcher. Yeah. It doesn't sound like it because you're just like a 4 ERA and 14 wins or 12 wins, 13 wins, but like you add all that up together, it's actually pretty decent. So I haven't done it yet, so it hasn't survived the use test, but I think actually I might have him ranked the highest out of all these guys. Bradley. I have Bradley.
Marcus Stroman is right there. Now he's a teammate of Nestor Cortes. He has to deal with a much more hitter-friendly environment again after spending the last 3 seasons with Citi Field and Wrigley Field as his home park. So I think you're going to get a little bump in ERA. I think that's kind of reflected in the projections. But a lot of the things you just said about Nestor Cortes are probably true about Stroman, at least in terms of ratios expectations. The difference would be you're probably not getting the same K rate. So to win, it has to be like kind of the pre-2022 volume from Stroman. He said back-to-back years under 140 innings. And part of what made Stroman so appealing earlier in his career with those year-over-year workloads. I mean, you see a couple 200s in there. If you go back to 16 and 17, you see a 184, a 179. It just seems like we're getting to the point now where you project him more for like 150 than 180, which is fine for this range, but it just dings him pretty good because he doesn't miss a ton of bats.
I don't know that projection systems project the defensive quality behind a pitcher because I don't know how many of them project defense and then add that into the pitching equation, if you know what I'm saying. So I can't comment on whether or not these projection systems have already included this. He has a 299 BABIP for his career, and only Steamer has him above that at 300. And most of them have him where he's kind of been established the last 3 years, which is below 300. And I think that's related to the fact he keeps the ball on the ground a lot. But what if his defense has been, behind him in the past, and what are they going to the future? If I look at the Yankees infield, it's up and down for me. I don't think actually Volpe is among the best defenders at shortstop. I don't think he's one of the worst, and he's certainly young. Glaber is much better cast at second base. He's probably, relative to his peers, maybe the best infield defender there. You're talking about Didi LeMahieu and Anthony Rizzo are pretty old. I doubt that I would make them plus defenders at their position without looking at each one of their defensive numbers across the spectrum. I'm doing a kind of like, what do I think of this when I just look at it? And I would say that this is not going to be one of the best defensive infields in baseball.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the fielding run value chart right now over at StatCast. You got a +4 on Anthony Rizzo. You've got a 1+1 on Volpe. I could see him getting better. I think there's things to like there. I think defensive runs saved were actually pretty favorable on Volpe, if memory serves me right. Torres was surprisingly a -4. I don't know why. I had the sort of baseline expectation he's been an average defender at second base as well, and then LeMahieu an even 0. So I don't think it's a bad defense, but yeah, it's probably not necessarily a good defense either. The question would be like, how much different is that than what he had with the Cubs last year? That was Dansby Swanson, fantastic at shortstop. Nico Horner, really good at second base. Nick Madrigal, who we rag on all the time, actually a good defender of all things. And Cody Bellinger played a little bit in the infield. Good defender there, good defender in the outfield. So there is a bit of a change just in terms of going from very good or great to even average on top of the park factors with Stroman. So might be someone that I end up kind of steering away from, even though the situation's not terrible overall.
Yeah, I think the thing that makes it different from league to league is this. If you have kind of a low innings maximum in your league, and you have to think about how many strikeouts you're getting for every inning, then he's not a great play, because he's going to strike out maybe not even 20% of the batters he sees. And so then the volume is less useful to you, because if you have an innings maximum, you're really trying to be efficient on the innings you've got. There are a lot of leagues who now just have an innings minimum. And in those, and you can have as many innings as you want, or in streaming situations, I think Stroman becomes a lot more, palatable.
Do you have any interest in John Means in this range? Came back from Tommy John surgery. It was only 23 and 2/3 innings last year, so it's even hard to draw any conclusions from that. On top of was the stuff even all the way back yet? Could it have been all the way back? I think it's more questions than answers. I think just knowing that the team is good, the park has changed, that gives you a potentially useful sort of back end arm. But what's the ceiling here, given all the questions? I mean, when he was last healthy and effective in 2021, it was a 22.7% K rate with a really good walk rate. So if the control's still there, is it control over stuff? Is that what you're looking for from Means?
I guess so. I mean, he had above average locations. It was a small sample last year, but he had above average locations on all his pitches. And if you look at his walk rates, that's been actually the most steady thing. If you look at his strikeout rates, they've ranged. I know it was just a tiny sample last year, 11% last year, but even in bigger samples, they've ranged from 22 to 25, 24. So like the strikeout rate is an unknown. The walk rate should be great. And it is great. I mean, like 5% is really, really good. That gives him a nice sort of baseline. Maybe he can provide them innings. They're going to have a good slugging team. They're going to have wins. But the strikeout rate is projected to be lower for Means than for Stroman. I've got a PPERA projection of 4.52, which is worse than the other systems. I'm looking for our K percentage projection. It is 19%, which is in line with what other people have. So I just don't think he's going to strike many guys out, and that's going to rob him of some value in most leagues.
It's a step toward Michaelis and Hendricks, but not all the way down to that level as far as that K rate goes. So yeah, it doesn't look like a guy that's going to end up on a lot of my teams, even though price isn't a problem at this stage for anybody. Let's flip over to the next part of this cluster. This is looking at guys that go in the pick 275 to 300 range. We got Kyle Harrison, Kutter Crawford, Seth Lugo, Edward Cabrera, Reese Olson, Emmet Sheehan. Lots of good names here in the first part of this group. You got some rebound candidates. You got some young pitchers on the rise. Kind of a grab bag of what do you need? What do you like? Who stands out to you in this group?
I got three right in the middle that I really, really like, that I have way higher than this, and that I will be gobbling up shares of as much as I can. If you want to hear a deeper dive on Kutter Crawford, that's who I discussed with Nick Pollock on the podcast called The Craft that we did at PitchCon last week. And I just love, he has 4 pitches that he can really spin it, but he keeps his fastball different. So he actually has 4 pitches that he spins really well. For some reason, he had an ERA over 6 at home and under 3 on the road. And it was not supported by the peripherals at all. Like his strikeout rate, his walk rate were the same at home and on the road. His mix was the same. I think he just needs to, I think that Boston is such a terrible place to pitch. And this is corroborated by the fact that people were telling me that, when I did a story on what mounds feel like, they said that Boston feels like it's closer to the plate. And so I think there's like a psychological component to pitching in Boston that is really difficult. And I think that the pitchers that come up there have to deal with that. And just think about, like, if you were a hitter and you had this big green target, you'd be like, ooh, like we've been talking about this with Tyler O'Neill. Maybe he's actually going to hit it to the green monster because it's there. You see it all the time. Now imagine you're the other side of your pitcher. And what they tell me is the backstop is really close. And so the people are really close. So you feel like the fans are on top of you. You got the green monster behind you. It must feel like you're very claustrophobic, and that every time you give up a ball, it's peppered off the monster, or it finds one of those little weird nooks and crannies that are close to the plate out in the outfield, and who's one of the most successful, the two most successful Boston pitchers of recent memory are people that had, I would just say, like, plus psychology. Just think about like Pedro Martinez and Kurt Schilling in terms of like who they are and like how they are in the mound. Like, you haven't seen a Boston pitcher. Like, Sale has some swag, but like I almost feel like Bello and Crawford, what's missing is swag. Like, they just need to get a little bit of success in Fenway underneath their feet, get some support from the fans, and start to like. I think there's breakout potential on both of them. I like Crawford better than Bello because he can spin it, and he can spin it to the point where he has an awesome cutter. Of course he does, and he has really good curveball and slider. Splitter, I take it or leave it, but the four seam's really good too. So I see everything there for a Crawford breakout. He's my favorite in this tier, bar none. And I may even have Lugo ahead of him, but Lugo, the reason I have Lugo ahead of him is not because of a breakout, is just because innings. And what I have here in front of you for YouTube users is that Lugo has 2+ breaking balls. And so what I've put here are all the people last year that pitched 100 innings and had a slider of 110 plus stuff plus and a curveball of 110 plus stuff plus. And this list has some of the best pitchers in baseball on it. Sandy Alcantara, Corbin Burns, Grayson Rodriguez, Kyle Bradish, Nick Pivetta makes an appearance, Bobby Miller, Bryce Miller. So I said all the good names. When I was coming up with this graphic to kind of tell you guys, why I love Seth Lugo, now I'm going to say the names that when I saw this, I said, oh God, have I made a mistake? Aaron Civale, Seth Lugo, and Luke Weaver are the only names on this list that have below average fastballs and 2+ curveballs, or 2+ breaking balls. And Aaron Civale's breaking balls are better than Lugo's, according to Stuff Plus. I still think that's the use case for Lugo, like a better Civale in a better park against worse opponents.
A lot of streaming potential, being in Kansas City, getting all those matchups in the AL Central.
And maybe I have them too high for somebody that you may not want to pitch in certain situations. So you may see him come down a little bit in revisions, but no matter what, I'll be the high man on Lugo. I think the innings are there. I think his ratios are going to be fine. I think his strikeout rate's going to be fine. He may not get a ton of wins. That's how I get into trouble a lot. Players like this on bad teams.
I mean, I think the real problem pitcher for you in this group is going to be Edward Cabrera. Like, I see it. I watch him. He's filthy. He's got an ultra mega fun changeup, good velo on the fastball. I think when we talked about him last season, it was on an episode of Project Prospect. We were trying to say, like, where does it go? Like, what are the outcomes for guys that have walk rates that are this high? And Edinson Volquez kept coming up as exciting pitcher, filthy stuff, not enough command, and just disappointment after disappointment, trying to work it out. Teams would keep giving him chances because it made sense to, and he just couldn't quite put it together and make it all pop over a full season. So why will Edward Cabrera be better? Why will we get a better outcome here?
Yeah, you're so mean to me.
It's just come on, that wasn't that bad.
This is the trouble that I'm going to run into, because this is catnip for me, the guy with big stuff and some issues locating. And the patron saint, of course, is now a Dodger, and I'm not going to say his name for the millionth time on this podcast. But this is what I think is interesting. Edward Cabrera, fastball location plus, 2021, 88, untenable. obviously untenable. There are no starting pitchers that have an 88 location plus on their fastball. 2022, 87. Oh God. 2023, 95. And now you start to get into the guys that just have bad command. And his overall location plus is 97. His slider location plus for his career is actually basically 100. So I see a guy who can use the slider sometimes when he needs a strike, has been improving his fastball command at the major league level, and has all that nasty stuff that I believe in.
Okay.
So, and the last thing that I will say is that we are in a bit of the YOLO tier. So, especially in 10 and 12 team leagues, why not take Edward Cabrera and see what his fastball locations are like early in the season? Why not? I would do that. Over a guy like Kyle Harrison, where we're still looking for a secondary. The fastball is pretty good, but we're still looking for a secondary that works. Edward Cabrera has everything he needs other than, command.
Yeah, I mean, home streaming possibilities are certainly there for him in Miami as well.
His home splits are good.
Yeah, I think I understand where you're coming from. I think for me, it's trying to temper my optimism in a way where I don't just have him on every single team and then have to live and die by the process of him putting it all together or not putting it all together and damaging my ratios along the way.
One thing that does come up though, like for our drafting holders, like I really like Lugo and Cabrera, especially in draft and hold, because I find that people start taking shots on like prospects who aren't in the big leagues yet too early. And so they're taking their shots on who are some of the big prospects that haven't even played in the majors, like a Jared Jones or who are some big names.
Hurston Waldrop kind of goes.
Yeah,
in this range.
So they start looking at that, and what I'm trying to gobble up are useful innings at that moment. And so I've got a lot of Edward Cabrera and Seth Lugo on these draft and holds, and the draft and hold format is like 50 rounds. You have to buy all your pitchers for this year. So on some level, I'm just buying a guy that like, oh, I think I can get 75 innings out of Edward Cabrera. I think I can get 125 innings out of Lugo or 110, because I'm going to have 15 starting pitchers on my roster.
Yeah.
And I'd rather they're all in the big leagues. So I could be like, ooh, this week, Seth Lugo, double top at home.
You're giving yourself more choices by choosing guys that are safer in having innings from start to finish.
Yeah, exactly.
Some of these guys are going to be half-season starting pitchers. They might be really good, but you have to deal with 2 or 3 months where they're giving you nothing, and they're not even an option for you. And that's actually harder than you think.
Yeah, I want like 10 starting pitchers available to me every week in draft and hold. I could be like,
fair.
I can play any of these 10. If you give me 10 starting pitchers to choose from every week in draft and hold, I can put together a pretty good staff. That's how I feel.
By the way, you mentioned Kyle Harrison, another one of those guys that had better results after a promotion than he did at AAA. PCL plus all the automated balls and strikes.
And not great command plus that ABS. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Like, do we give him a pass? Did the Giants try and just say, well, we're not sending him back to AAA. We'll find a way to use him and just keep him as part of our staff, even if he's not starting at the beginning of the season. It seems like the plan is still to make him a big part of the rotation over the course of the year.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I lost the plot there for a second.
It was less than it was like 5 innings per outing on average. Really.
Oh yeah, Harrison. I do think that they lost a lot of innings, and I think that he's one of the few people that they can actually just maybe put in for 5 innings. Like, who do you trust on this staff? You got Logan Webb. Yes, I trust him. And then it goes Ross Stripling right now on Fangraphs as the number 2. Kyle Harrison, Keaton Wynn, Alex Cobb is out for half the year, and then you got Jordan Hicks. And even if you are stretching Jordan Hicks out and feel good about him, you might make him a foreign dive guy. He might be Jake Junis next year, and a spruced up Jake Junis, but a Jake Junis nonetheless in terms of like how they use him. And Keaton Wynn throws more splitters than fastballs, which does not exist as a starting pitcher situation in most places. Ross Stripling, yes, he's learning the death ball, which is a sort of that Pete Fairbanks power curve slider thing that doesn't have sideways movement. I guess Ross Stripling could add a breaking ball that's really great to go with his changeup, and maybe the package comes together. But that still gives them 2 pitchers. So I think that Kyle Harrison, and they could even sign Blake Snell. And I think Kyle Harrison is an everyday member of this rotation to start the year. I just don't know. His secondaries aren't very good. I did a deep dive with Nick Pollock on that podcast, and it's he's like kind of a pronator, but he doesn't have a good changeup. So he's got this 2-plane fastball, which I like, and the fastball is decent. None of his secondary pitches rates above a 90 stuff plus, and he doesn't even locate them well. So I don't know what they're going to do with him for secondary pitches.
Interesting too to see the gap between the stuff numbers and the scouting grades. And this isn't. I'm never trying to dunk on anybody. I think it's instructive and important to look into where these gaps are. This is a big fastball, big slider by scouting report, and the slider hasn't been there yet. But he's so young, much like Bradley. You say, well, he just turned 22 in August. Like, he could get a lot better still, right? There's got to be some room for growth here, given the age.
I have been talking to some of the pitching coaches I trust about this idea of like what fastballs are easier to build off of, and I will say that they're a little bit more upbeat about like a Bradley type fastball than a Harrison fastball, because in terms of who you are with a lower slot and being a pronator, the sort of mechanical things that you're doing to create that Kyle Harrison fastball, it's harder to add certain pitches to that. I'm a little surprised I haven't been able to add a sweeper, but as a lefty, adding a sweeper doesn't solve all your problems. And so the fact that the changeup is not great, and then the reason I think that there's a little bit of difference between the scouting grades and the stuff plus grades is that like he has a 2-plane slurve that looks like it has good velo. I just think that there's something about the interaction with that fastball that doesn't work. That's what the model is pointing out. I think that pitch in by itself in a vacuum might be okay, but for him, it's kind of a dead zone curveball. I want him to say he has a new breaking ball in the spring. Yeah. If he does, I'm interested, but he's tried it a couple times.
Curious to see if we do get that news from Kyle Harrison come spring training. Other 2 guys in this group, Reese Olson and Emmet Sheehan, a couple of younger guys. Olson, really impressive, I would say, to what he's done in the big league so far, because he wasn't a highly regarded prospect. Pretty nice get for them in a small trade with the Brewers. And Olson was better in the big leagues last season than he was at any prolonged stop in the minors. Maybe another case where the AA walk rate and the major league walk rate kind of give us a better story than what was happening in the middle during his time at AAA with that automated balls and strike system. Reese Olson did have some elevated walk rates earlier in his career, though. So it's a little harder to just say, yep, that's really the guy. But I think he's someone that jumped out a little bit in the model when he debuted. And as we've said many times, this is a really nice ballpark for streaming purposes. So I think Reese Olson has some things to build on here. And we tried to build the rotation a few weeks ago. He seems like he's more likely to be in than out based on the success that he had upon arrival last year.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. It's a little bit. It's not Giolito asking like what kind of a fastball, what kind of a changeup he has. It's more of a power change than a straight change that Giolito throws. But the combinations are Giolito asking that. He's got the good changeup and slider combination, and that's a little bit rare to have. A plus pitch. That go in different directions like that. And that's enough for me to circle his name in AL onlys and draft and holds and deeper leagues. I think even in some of these shallower leagues as, one of your final picks as an upside pick. But like Giolito, really poor numbers on the fastballs. And if you want to know why, you can kind of look at his player page on Baseball Savant, and you can just see all the blue that shows up in his movement profile His sinker has exactly average movement. His four-seam fastball has less ride than average and just a tiny bit more horizontal movement than average. 94.8 is decent velo though, and he's young, and he's got that changeup and slider. So, I'm going to give him some shots. I'm just not going to spend too much on him.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to jump up draft boards or anything like that. I think this is probably where he stays for most of draft season too, which is kind of nice. I don't think that's true of Emmet Sheehan. Sheehan threw 123 in the third innings last year. We got the news earlier this week. They're slow playing Walker Buehler. Makes sense coming off the second Tommy John surgery. They added James Paxton, but we know Paxton's injury history is extensive. We know that the Dodgers like to use 6 starters anyway, so Sheehan should be in the rotation. He has a path to 160 plus innings. I think that's pretty normal for this group anyway. A lot of these guys have either health concerns, they're younger, they haven't been fully stretched out before, so I don't think you're really giving up volume at this point. You're getting somebody who's exciting on a good team. And with Sheehan, he used the fastball a lot last year, big time velo, actually got hitters to chase the fastball a lot. I actually like his secondaries. I was watching some highlights before we started recording. The slider and change both look pretty good to me. Maybe it just comes down to command being a little tighter for Emmet Sheehan. You see some pretty weird walk rates throughout his time in the minors, but we saw it last year with Ryan Pepio as a guy that always had that skill and kind of fixed it. So perhaps some similar correction is coming from Emmet Sheehan as a guy that definitely has good enough stuff, but just needs to refine it a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm just a little worried about, generally we've talked about the Dodgers and what they do with innings. So I think he tops out at 110, 120 innings this year in the major leagues. Some of it will be in the minor leagues because he has options and they can send him down, and Walker Buehler's healthy and all of a sudden there's no rotation spot, but then somebody else gets hurt and he comes back up. And I think it's going to be that kind of up and down nature for him. And I wonder if that's going to be the best situation for him to improve his command, which all of the different ways to measure command agree that he's got a little bit of an issue there. It's not quite Cabrerian, Edwardian, but 11% walk rate in the 10.5% walk rate in the majors in his debut. None of his pitches has an above 98 location plus. And then on top of that, Fangraphs command grade 30 present. That report might have been a while back, but 40 future on the command. So they never thought he really had the command to break out. But the stuff is there. The difference between him and Edward Cabrera is just like Edward Cabrera has a rotation spot for as long as he wants. I think he could get demoted because of the walk rate and because of talent, but in terms of is there a rotation spot available to him when he wants it? I would say yes.
That's
for
fair.
Cabrera, and for Sheehan, I would say yes to begin the season.
I think it's yes to begin the season, but if he's pitching well enough,
they'll find something else to do.
Enough can change here where he'll just keep a spot. It's not guaranteed, but I think he's got just enough stuff where he could actually earn it with that step forward. This group has a few more names in it, including one that I like as just a kind of a blind rebound candidate. It's Luis Severino. And all year last year, I kept waiting it out. The velocity, the stuff looked pretty good. It was like, okay, he shouldn't be getting hit this much, which led me to wonder, is he tipping pitches? What is happening to Luis Severino? Why is he struggling this much? Because there's a really long track record when he's been healthy of high quality innings and plenty of Ks. He has SP1 track record, and he was nowhere near that last year.
Yeah, he had the highest swing rate against his fastball of his career. He had the highest swing rate with runners on against the fastball in the big leagues for 2 or 3 months last season when we had a source telling us that he was tipping pitches. We had an advanced scout from opposing team confirm that he was tipping pitches. So me and Will Salmon did a larger piece about this if you want to read about it on The Athletic. But here's an interesting overlay. We're about to play you some video of basically a fastball slider overlay of Luis Severino in the middle of this period when he was batters were swinging at 55, 60% of the fastballs they saw with a runner on second base. So I think they knew when the fastball was coming. And I want you to look at two things during this overlay, which is just to slow down. I tried to really match it up, fastball over slider. Two things. One thing is at the beginning of the clip, you can look into Luis Severino's glove from second base. You see there's a guy on second base. Gunnar Henderson's on second base, I think, or he's at the plate, but they've got a guy on second base. He's looking straight into his glove. And then the last thing is at the end of the overlay, you'll notice that the leg kicks through differently on the fastball. And I'll talk a little bit after that, but just look for the leg kick at the end and look right into his glove at the beginning of this clip. So you can see that like you're looking right into his glove, so you can see whatever grip you're doing. So the guy on second can do whatever he does to tell the guy at the plate what's coming. The kick thing. So I went on foul territory, and AJ Przinsky was like, "We can't see that. What are you talking about? No hitter can see that." And I tried to push back, but I'm not a hitter, so I'm not trying to tell him what he knows, what he can and can't see. But the two things that I would say to someone who says we can't see something like that is, A, there's been some research that suggests that pre-pitch information, pre-release information is more important than post-release information. It's a pretty good study. And it comes from cricket, but it's pretty strong study. And so that's telling me that body cues are telling you stuff, how it comes out of the hand. What can you see fingers? Is there a different, elbow thing? Is there a different, does the leg kick out? Is there a different effort level on the fastball? And the way that I would push back is like, I asked Mookie Betts one time, what can you see out of the hand, out of the pitcher's hand? And he said, I don't know, man. I can't tell you. I can't, like, I know in my head, and I'm paraphrasing, but I know in my head, but I can't tell you. Like, I can't say it. Like,
can't describe it. Yeah. It's such a micro thing.
It's just the reaction.
It's a recognition, right? And it happens so fast. It's so subtle, happens so fast that it's like learning the slightest difference in a pattern that would, to a regular person, look the same. Like a person who's not a professional hitter might have to watch the same thing looped over and over and over again to go, oh, wait, there's the difference. And after seeing it 200 times, maybe you'd see it. You don't get to see it 200 times in the big leagues. Yeah. And then they also, like, they may not be able to tell you what was different because they're just reacting. So there's like this, like what we say verbally comes from like a different part of our brain. And this is like animal brain stuff hitting. My favorite hitting quote comes from Benito Santiago. He hit a home run that won a game. And this is a really seminal moment. I'm a young kid, San Francisco, with my dad. We watching a Giants game. Benito Santiago wins the game with a home run. They go up to him and do the post-game interview. They put the mic in front of him. So what did you see on that pitch, Benito? What did you see on that pitch when you hit it all out? And he goes, I see the ball. I hit it hard. Like, just being locked in. That's it. What's he going to tell you? He might not even know anything. He might not be able to say anything more. So I think that there's, some differences in Severino's mechanics. It is fair to point out that he's a veteran, and they probably knew about this in New York for the Yankees. So like, why is it going to be better with the Mets? And that's fair. But I also think, like, people are hyper aware of this stuff now. They have even better ways to spot tipping now that I think it's going to be the number one thing they work on all spring. And it's like coming back from an injury or developing a new pitch or something. It's like, this is what he's going to be thinking about in the spring. He's going to be working on. Is he going to have his glove open to the second baseman? I don't think he'll do that this year. So, I mean, we're a year removed from 3.18 ERA, 1 WHIP with 112 Ks and 102 innings. That's a really good pitcher dealing with Yankee Stadium for his home park. It shouldn't fall apart. Much simpler way of putting it. It's just like, why not take a guy that was really good a year ago? But the detailed reason is like, why was he so bad? Like, hey, that's at least correctable, at least seemingly correctable, especially with a full off season to try and mask some of those things that may have been leaking previously. Michael Wacha goes in this range, and maybe another low-key, solid depth addition for the Royals. I kind of see him as a streamer as well. Keep in mind, 134 and a third innings last season. That was his highest total since 2017. So you're getting good ratios. You're probably not getting them over a massive volume. So really just a guy that I'm going to throw out there for home starts and try to pick on the AL Central with.
I don't trust the ratios that much either. There have been some really, really awful years in Walker's career. And I think it's related to his arsenal. Just he's a changeup first guy that's tried to develop a cutter. The fastball's declining over time. And the last 2 years, it seems like he's found something, but in terms of like looking at his pitch mix or whatever, just reducing the amount of fastballs he's thrown is really the biggest difference, and pushing that changeup usage. And at some point it just becomes untenable. Like he's at 35% changeup usage. Can he, if he comes into camp, he's 91.9 or whatever, 91.8, and he pushes the changeup usage to 40%, like at what point does it become untenable? Because the changeup really lives off the fastball. So I feel like there's a non-zero chance that like at 32, we start seeing the decline, it might become fast. And since you already have this innings question, like I have innings questions plus ratio questions, so I'm mostly out.
I think I'd rather just take Griffin Canning, the last of the group, because he kicked some of the major health woes last season, stayed relatively healthy, has innings pitched risk the same as Waka, but I think even though the recent injury history is scarier, the ceiling's higher. There was a nice velo jump last year from Canning. He was at 94.7 with the fastball. He's got 4 pitches, and he's clearly got a job. The Angels need him to start every 5th day all season. Like he's a guy that they're going to try to lean on pretty heavily again this year, and maybe we get 150 innings with pretty good ratios and a good K rate, because he was another guy that looked pretty good in the second half last season.
Yeah, I've got a basically a 4.4 projection with a 25% strikeout rate in the newest revised projections, which are on the Google Doc for subscribers. I will also release a new set of rankings sometime in the next month that will include these revised projections. They have the revised stuff plus in them. He's done some cool stuff where he did some aging. So you can expect a 39-year-old to lose 5 points of stuff plus, according to his aging curve that he did. So he's aged stuff plus, he's regressed elements of it. And I think these are going to be really strong projections. So, hey, a 4.09 with 25% strikeout rate for Canning, that's better than you're going to get from a lot of places down here. I mean, just to give you an example of like why I'm out on Waka. The Walker projection is for a 4.77 ERA with a 20% strikeout rate. So yeah, I'll take Canning. And yes, not only did he have a velo boost last year, but the velo got better and better as the season went on. So that says to me that there's sort of a increase in health. And I like him as a guy who has a good slider and a good changeup, and the curveball is decent enough that a lot of opportunity to hide the fastball here. And he's kind of going towards a real even mix where you'll get to a point where it's, 25%, 25%, 25%, 25%. And he's getting pretty close to that. So I like that. You don't know what's coming. 3 of the 4 pitches are pretty good. The 4th is the fastball, and he should have good command of that. So 380 Sierra last year for him. So basically all the signs are pointing in a good direction for Canning.
Yeah, just another one of those guys that has the significantly elevated health risk. That's the thing that holds him back and keeps him available near this pick 300 mark. It's open water everywhere else, right? Starting pitchers available beyond pick 300 overall. There is absolutely no way we could cover all of them on this show.
And we should have a full show for deep pitchers and hitters, I think.
Yeah, and as you start to look at some of the names that are just outside the top 300, you see plenty of guys that could move up. Absolutely a large group here. If you said Paul Skeens is going to be in the opening day rotation for the Pirates, his ADP would shoot up. He would immediately become probably a pick 200 guy for some people because of the pedigree and the potential. I don't know if you would necessarily value him that way, but he would get a lot of helium.
120 innings this year, and at least 20 of them are going to come in the minor leagues.
Okay. Well, that might still be okay. But Mackenzie Gore is kind of interesting because what you're looking for in this range, you're looking for what could go right for the most part. These are your lottery tickets in a lot of leagues. These are your guys that maybe they don't stick on the roster all year, but if you can find someone that is useful for half their starts, or if you find someone who's useful for more than that, it's a pretty big win. Now, Mackenzie Gore, you pointed this out before the show. Fastball location is something that maybe still has some room for improvement, something that could unlock one more level from him.
Yeah, I just, it's not the same kind of fastball that Verlander has, but I just think that Gore can unlock more swinging strikes by having more of a heat map like Verlander's on the left, where he's throwing the ball high in the zone. And I do know that he does not have great natural command. So will that come with an elevated walk wrist? Perhaps. But if you could pump that K percentage to 27%, I think he can walk 10% of the guys he sees. And I think overall that'd be a good change for him to strike more guys out. It is interesting to think about what that would do for his home run rate. Higher pitches do kind of go for home runs, but with a 95 mile an hour fastball from the left side, I just want him to use that fastball for whiffs more often. And that's what I see when I look at these two heat maps. And I see that in his profile. I mean, one of the comps that came up when I talked to him and when I looked at pitch comps and stuff was Clayton Kershaw. Now, what you might see is the difference between, 60 command, like same stuff ish, and 60 command on one guy and 40 command on the other. That is possibly what we're seeing, in the difference. But if you can just inch that command forward, maybe change some of his locations. And there's an interesting also non-player acquisition on the Washington team, a player that was really used to pitching high in zone with his fastball. Sean Doolittle is now liaison between the stats team and the coaching staff and the players. And so I think a little Sean Doolittle in Mackenzie Gore's life could be really strong.
That's pretty interesting. Yeah, I think plenty of velo on the fastball, deep enough pitch mix, lots of ways it could go right. Gore already has a bit of a home run problem anyway, so what are you really risking? Just
how much worse is going to get?
Make the adjustment. See if you can actually get more mileage out of that fastball by nudging it up in the zone. Completely makes sense to me. Lance Lynn is in this range. I don't have any interest in him. He's just not interesting. Pure oatmeal at this point. But
I'll take him. Him and Miles Michaelis for me are just interesting in, again, that sort of draft and hold situation where I just want to have him available to me when the Pirates are in St. Louis or something. I'm not picking on them, but when a bad team's in St. Louis and I'm looking to buy 50 to 60 innings of just the best primo matchups I can come up with, because a guy like Lynn and Michaelis will still have 50 innings every year where they're useful.
Right. Well, I think when I see this group has John Gray in it, it has Jordan Hicks.
Do you have other places you can get 50, 60 useful innings?
I think Gray is the guy that I like a lot more than Lynn, especially. Well, even Michaelis. Michaelis goes a lot later. I think where Michaelis goes, he starts to make sense in really deep leagues where you can't make moves because he has a job. He can get you bulk. You can stream him. Gray
better
might
than
be
having
good.
a zero, having a nothing in one of your lineup slots. I think there is a debate about whether or not having Michaelis in that lineup slot or having a middle reliever in that lineup slot is better. And I can hear that, but I would say having both of those options is best, because some days you want to put that guy in, but some days Miles Michaelis will be in for the win. I mean, this guy wins games and he goes deep into games. So you just have to pick the right matchups.
Yeah, that can be a little harder than we make it out to be sometimes with the lower K rate pitchers, especially, right?
But Marco Gonzalez for 2 straight years led the league in decisions, and that's I see some of these guys as teams being hey, let's save the bullpen today. He's going to lose it for us, or he's going to win it for us.
Yeah, I guess that's one way to look at it. Jordan Hicks goes in this range. I've had him on a couple of my teams already, and people are kind of why? Do you trust him? Do you think they're going to use him like a regular starter? And my answer is kind of well, I don't know. They're the Giants. They do some weird stuff. But a couple things that have crossed my mind with Jordan Hicks since they made this signing is, one, I don't really trust the Cardinals' pitching development overall. They don't really seem to have that facet figured out. It's an area of opportunity for them if we're being very polite about it. 2, the stuff is obviously very good. 3, as we've said in the show many times, there are numbers between 1 and 5, right? You're not necessarily just a short reliever or a starter. You could be something else. And the Giants
That's what I'm worried
understand it.
about, though, that he ends up in between.
Yeah, but in a draft and hold, both the leagues where I have Hicks are draft and hold leagues. If we think short relievers might be better than fringy starters, the way the Giants use pitchers is probably great for the late rounds because you do get the win chances, especially if you're throwing an opener in front of them. So you get good win probability. You get optimal usage in terms of someone that might be able to just burn through the lineup one time and go 3 innings. And you're getting good ratios because they're not staying out there for the second or third time through the order. But there's also stuff in Hicks's profile. When you go back, I was reading the old Baseball America scouting report. At one point, he had a curveball that was his best pitch. Like, where has that been? Like, there's all sorts of stuff that's happened with Jordan Hicks over the course of his career that makes you think, like, maybe you wipe the slate clean and there's just a ton of different ways you can kind of rebuild him as a starter.
Yeah, and the model likes his splitter. So, like, theoretically, the hardest thing would be, what he does against lefties when he wants a hard pitch, since he's kind of a sinker guy. But if he just started throwing a crappy 4-seam, just enough to do something with lefties or a cutter or something, yeah, I feel like he's also shown the ability to spin the ball. And we've also just said he can't be a starter because he tried 8 times in the major leagues and it wasn't good.
Right. And why they gave up on him that quickly? Maybe it was concerns about injury. Maybe it was not being patient enough with the command. The command's a concern, right? Like, what are the location numbers on his pitches? Like, the stuff numbers pop, but are the location numbers a wet blanket?
Yeah, they're not good. Yeah, this is why how it fails or survives. 98 location plus on the 4-seam, 98 on the sinker. Hey, what are we even talking about? Like, 98 is passable.
Yeah, it's better than Edward Cabrera, right?
Yeah, it's better than Edward Cabrera.
Okay.
And does not have good location plus on some of the other pitches. The slider and the sweeper, that's a little bit tough for him. So it's going to put pressure on his hard pitches to put them in the right place. But I see a wide enough arsenal that this could work for sure. He already throws that crappy 4-seam that I was talking about, and it's 137 stuff plus. So it's not that crappy.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, that's at 99 miles an hour. And what's he going to be as a starter? But I'm still interested.
He's going to have plenty. And the other part of this too, I don't know how many things I said were on
what
my
could
list.
go right factor on this is like through the roof.
Right. And there are other uses for him if it doesn't work as a starter. The other key thing with the skills is, DVR, why do you believe in Jordan Hicks, but you don't necessarily believe in Edward Cabrera? I would say I'm more likely to take the chance on Hicks in part because we've seen a much better home run rate from him throughout his career too. Like, you can walk guys or you can give up home runs. You can't do both. Cabrera has had problems with both. Hicks does not give up a lot of home runs. I don't think that's going to change much, even in the starting role. I think the stuff is just such that it's really hard to square up. I think the ballpark continues to protect him for that, even an expanded role. So I definitely can't sit here and say, yeah, Jordan Hicks is going to go 6 every time out. He's going to be awesome. It's going to work great. 30 starts, 6 innings a time, 180 innings, done. No, I'm not expecting that. I just think there's going to be a lot of times where I can use him, especially in a 15-team league. And relative to what he brings to the table, the price is very low.
Yeah, I'm going to do this real quick because we're running out of time and we probably should have a deep sleeper thing. But one thing that I would say is when you're looking for deep sleepers in these deep leagues and you're in the draft and holds or in your AL onlys and stuff like that, I think you should have a diverse approach to finding your sleepers. Don't just take all of the best stuff plus guys to the left or whatever. Like, I think you can take them for different reasons. So Jameson Tyon for me, second half split 3.7 ERA, where he's figuring out how to incorporate that sweeper into an existing situation. It doesn't look that great by, stuff plus or whatever, but it's a guy kind of putting together a wide arsenal and like figuring things out. Not every guy who's successful has great stuff plus. Trevor Rogers has just the best PPERA projection left after 300. It's a 4.16 partially because of that park. Why not just take him because of that? Like this is, why not do things that are a little bit different from player to player? Louis Varland, I think, has one of the best stuff pluses left on this list. You can do a pitch mix one where you're just like Sean Manaea added a sweeper in the second half. Like, good enough. Like have a reason that you like them. I'm not saying just, sort of scattershot, have a reason that you like them. But whether it be a park play or a projections play or a stuff plus play or an eye test play, kind of have one in each bucket if you have that kind of a depth of the league.
Yeah, I would say the other thing I've thought about in this range is, can you just take a guy on a good team? Dean Kramer is on a good team. He's in a good park.
Multiple pitches. Multiple pitches. Yeah, like fastball cutter is his foundation. Why can't he just tweak one of those other pitches?
I probably watched a little more Dean Kramer than a person should have watched outside of Orioles fans last year, and at times it was pretty intriguing. We saw a really good result in 2022, 3.23 ERA that year. That was before the park changes. A lot of Ks, a lot of volume, a lot of ways for him to get better. He's higher in your rankings than I would have thought. I'm in a draft and hold at round 27.
I have him in the top 75, but
I'm in round 27 right now, where I'm trying to choose
a lot of innings, good team, a lot of pitches, decent projection. I don't know what I'm missing. It seems fine.
I wish Sean Manaea was still available, and I wish Jamison Taillon was still available in the draft that I'm in right now. But it's more like guys like Kramer, JP Sears. JP Sears has a job. I don't know. I don't even know if you can use him as a home streamer necessarily. I think that's the problem.
You can. I have all of those Oakland guys. Joe Boyle I like a little bit more than most because there's your stuff play.
Mm-hmm.
But you can have a park play too. You're just like Sears. I'm gonna pitch him 60 innings, and they're all going to be home double taps or homes.
Yeah, and Sears would be one of those guys. You just look back at his minor league track record, and he's like, this guy got good results, great ratios, pretty good K rates.
It's a decent
few ways to get better. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I just get torn on why didn't he have more success at home last year? It's like, well, the answer is it really isn't that many innings. You can have funky home road splits for a season. It's not the end of the world. So
theoretically, it should be good at home.
Should be, right. Your process was good, even if your ratios get decimated.
Yeah, there's very few people who are worse in Oakland than as pitchers in other places.
Yeah. So there are a ton of names we didn't get to. We will get to them on a future episode. I think the easiest thing to do, if you have specific late pitchers we didn't talk about, send us an email, ratesandbarrels@gmail.com. We'll kind of build the rundown around some of the players that people find to be the most interesting. You mentioned Trevor Rogers. I think people are just forgetting about him right now. If he shows up at spring training healthy, he should have a rotation spot for the Marlins, and look what he did in that breakthrough season a couple of years ago.
Yeah, we finished up the hitter previews too. We are going to get to each team, so there'll be another opportunity to talk about people. But email us about deep hitters, and maybe we'll have either a combined deep sleepers pod or a deep sleeper hitters, deep sleeper pitchers. I'm definitely going to have my piece that comes out every year that has a pretty good track record for picking after 300, if I do say so myself. So you'll have plenty of opportunities, especially if you subscribe to The Athletic, to get us talking about them or get a larger analysis on the written page.
Definitely. And the good news is one more episode still coming out this week. We have the relievers. That's going to be a robust episode that we're going to do on Thursday, giving you the strategies you want to use if you're in a league that uses saves. We'll probably do a little bit of saves and holds talk at the end of the show, because a lot of the non-closer relievers have value in those formats. So drop us a line, ratesandbarrels@gmail.com. Be sure to like this video if you haven't done so already. Appreciate everybody who stuck around to the end. You can find Eno on Twitter @EnoSaris. You can find me @Derek and Ripe, but the pod is @Rates and Barrels. It's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you tomorrow.
Thanks for listening.